Hello and welcome to the Inner Sanctum. Where are we, May? With guest teacher Rich Martini, author of, God, you're the author of so many books. Let me just, Hacking the Afterlife is something that comes to mind because that's your latest book, right? Flipside.
Well, I've got two latest ones since then, but Hacking the Afterlife is a good place to start.
Okay, so in the year you've done another one. So Flipside, it's a wonderful afterlife, or Flipside. Which was your first book, Flipside?
Flipside was the first one, correct.
And then It's a Wonderful Afterlife. I just love these names. So you've got 1 and 2, It's a Wonderful Afterlife, Hacking the Afterlife, Flipside, The Journey into the Afterlife, and then you've got Earhart. What's that? You've got one in Spanish, is it? Is it in Spanish?
Oh, I've got them in Italian and Spanish, and they're doing translations in Portuguese and French.
Oh,
well,
okay.
The latest two books come out of my research where I've been filming a medium that I met for Hacking the Afterlife, a woman named Jennifer Schaefer. She's out of Manhattan Beach in Los Angeles. So the latest book is called Backstage, Pass to the Flipside, Talking to the Afterlife with Jennifer Schaefer.
Okay.
And the thing that's kind of interesting about that title is it comes out of the work that Jennifer and I were doing. And so I don't know if you're familiar with Hacking the Afterlife, but in that book, she called me out of the blue and said, I'm a medium. I've listened to your Flipside and your other books on tape, and I just wanted to, say, I think what you're doing is great. And I said, oh, that's great. What do you do? She said, well, I'm a medium, a psychic medium. And I said, oh, well, that's not really my purview, because in my research, I've found that that there is no future set. It's not locked in cement. Whereas you hear a lot of people say it is. And a lot of psychics and mediums and stuff say that's hello, hi. And a lot of, they say, like, I can predict the future and I can tell you about your love life. Oh my God, Rosie has got a cat. Hello, kitty. Wait, there you go. Oh, meow. We can talk to that cat too. Anyway, so Jennifer and I started working in this kind of concentrated way where every week I spend a couple hours with her communicating with friends of mine who passed away. People that I knew who are no longer on the planet. And I have a movie coming out next week on Gaia called Backstage Pass to the Flipside, Talking to Bill Paxton.
I saw it.
Oh, it's there now. Oh, great. Mm-hmm. That's funny. They told me it was premiering May 19th, which is weird because Bill's birthday is May 17th. So the thing about a book, I mean, it's complicated because I just decided after Bill passed away to see if these mediums that I was talking to could access him. And I would say, I want to talk to my friend Bill. And they would say, he's here. And I'd say, who was there to greet him when he crossed over? How did you die? What was the process? And then I asked questions like, how did we meet? So I know the answer to those questions. And all three mediums got those answers absolutely correct. So that movie's out of that. But Jennifer and I started talking to friends of mine who would, Billy was one of them, other people came forth. And the unusual part of that is this kind of exploration. So not only like proving that life goes on, which is a big proof, right? That's the big Megillah right there. But beyond that, once Jennifer was able to prove to me consistently over and over and over again that life goes on and that you can talk to anybody that's on the other side, I started to think of her as a cell phone to people on the other side. So not just how are you and why'd you leave or what's the matter or what's going on over there, but what's the architecture of the afterlife? How do you get around? How do you create things in your mind? How do you communicate with us? What's the process that you have to go through in order for us to hear you or see you or in some other way dream about you? And by asking these questions consistently to different people, of course, you get different answers, but they're all about the same information. The same words might be used, like frequency. So the term backstage pass came from someone who passed away. And I was asking him, so what's it like to come and talk to us? And he said, well, your friend Luana, that's my friend who passed away, who has been helping me to do this kind of research. He said, quote unquote, he said, your friend Luana is like the person who's backstage and they have the clipboard and it has the names of who can talk, who can be in the VIP lounge. And then she hands out the pass so that they can talk to us. Oh my God, you have a cat too. That's great. Or is that the same? No, that's another cat. Laura's got a cat.
Oh, Laura.
Anyway.
Laura's got a few cats.
Very good. Rosie's got a cat. I have one.
I have one.
You have one. Well, can I tell you guys? Cats are aliens. No, I'm kidding. I don't know. What do you guys want to talk about?
Yeah.
I don't want to take. Well, let me put it this way. You guys are much more advanced than I am in this area, in this field. But because I've been working with mediums, I've spent a lot of time talking to them. I've, of course, picked up certain techniques.
Yeah.
And also because here I am using, a medium as a cell phone. So Jennifer Schaefer is out of Manhattan Beach. She works with law enforcement on missing person cases. It was one of those things that fell into her lap because friends of hers, husbands would die, and then she'd say, I know what happened. But she was like a stockbroker. And it was, but, obviously this other world consumed her life. And then law enforcement people started showing up at her door. And somewhere along the line, she called me up. And like I say, it was not my field at all, because I was filming people under hypnosis, talking about the afterlife from personal perspective. But in Jennifer's case, as I was trying to talk her out of having lunch with me, she was saying, let's get together. And I was going, psychics, you're looking for love and you're trying to predict the future. And I don't believe the future is set. And I know that people sign up for lifetimes without their mates. So, but as I was like doing this, I said, wait a second, missing persons. How'd you like to work on a missing person case with me, the most famous missing person in history? And she went, I'm in. And I spent the next 3 hours, I went over down to her office and I spent 3 hours filming her accessing Amelia Earhart.
All right, yeah.
And out of anybody I know, and I've worked on all the movies about her, out of anybody I know, I can easily say that I've met everybody in the field. So I know what happened to her. I already have all the details, let's say, through all my research, extensive. But here I was talking to someone on the other side who knew more than I knew, which was startling. And then she started telling me new information. And I mean by that, this is what I look for in this work, which is, we don't think that we can talk to spirit. We think that we have to just allow spirit to come through and let them talk to us, which is fine. But I've learned you can ask spirit. You can say, tell me something.
Yeah.
And tell me something new that couldn't be found online, is not in the zeitgeist, is not in the research. And so Amelia told us about her being dug up by a couple of soldiers in 1945. Now, I knew that happened. Jennifer could never have known that, but I knew that these two soldiers had dug her up. But in she telling us what happened, she said, but they only found my arm. And at the time, I thought, what? I've never heard of such a thing. And I really have researched it. So I was like, what? What do you mean they only found your arm? They only found my arm. And my body was reburied by some people who took care of me when I died. So in other words, the natives had moved her body to another location, okay? And so after this 3 hours of talking to somebody who knew more about Amelia than I did, as I was driving away from Jennifer's office, the phone rang, and it was an NTSB, National Transportation Safety Board member, calling me to say he had just been given privy to these government documents that really they show everything that happened to her. And he was calling me to say, Rich, everything you told me about Earhart is accurate because it's in these documents. He said, however, when they dug her up, they only found her arm. And that was literally a mile from Jennifer's office. So, it was like a boom.
Aha moment.
I realized there was no arguing with something like that. And then I did forensically do the research and found these guys in an interview in Chicago Tribune, like 1977, and off camera, they said, when we dug her up, we only found a partial rib cage and an arm.
Mm.
So that's what I've been focusing on. New information from people who are no longer on the planet.
Mm.
That helps us as loved ones to verify that they still exist, right? So Jennifer and I do this thing where we kind of have these once a week. We get together and we're in a restaurant in Manhattan Beach, and I turn my camera on and I film our conversations. And whoever shows up, we'll interview them and I'll ask them questions, very simple, basic. Who was there to greet you when you crossed over? Right? That's not a question I can answer, nor can she, but they can. Who are you hanging out with? What are you doing? How do you do that? What's the math involved? How do you create the sensation of golfing?
Mm.
How do you create swimming? I mean, because, there's no swimming pool.
Well, okay. I want to stop here because I want you to answer those questions. I'm sure we all want to know, how do you create that? I'm just thinking of my friend Nikki, who died at 40. She was one of the thalidomide people. And when I went for a swim, I was living up on the beaches. I went for a swim after I found out, and she came to me while I was swimming and said, enjoy the feeling of the ocean, enjoy the water, enjoy that visceral feeling. She said, for me, it's just a memory now. And she was just really asking me to enjoy all the things about life.
Tactile.
Tactile, like the feeling of the water on your skin. And because you can recreate it in the afterlife, but it's not the same, right?
Right. It's hard to do. But I would also say this, that when they cross over, it's like going to class again. So you get over there and then you're like, God, I really want a glass of water. And you start thinking about it and you're like, I can't do it. But after a while, other people show you. This is what the feeling. No, but you're right.
Go for it, Kristen.
People consistently say what's missing is like you can hug a tree over there. There are trees that exist that you see and that you're walking through a forest. And I do this often with people as they're walking through a forest and they're saying, I'm seeing a forest. I'll say, go over to a tree. Can you put your arms around it? What does that feel like? And they'll describe it. And then I'll say, can you put your hand through it? Because it's etheric. And then I'll ask, what does that feel like? What do you experience? And I hear that consistently, hug a tree, because you can't over there. Smells are different. Tastes are different. But that being said, I've met quite a few people who say, I'm cooking over here. I'm creating dishes.
Yeah.
I'm trying different flavors. Mm-hmm. So their mathematics are just better than ours are.
But yeah, I think that's really important when talking about the afterlife, because we always talk about the bliss and the beauty and it's all, so divine and heaven. But we forget that, when we are dead, when we're not in our bodies, just the little things of being human, the touch of someone, the touch of the fur of the cat, the taste of something, just this visceral, 5 sensory experience is something that you can recreate, but not to the same extent, and just to appreciate that while we're still alive, like really appreciate touch and smell and taste and
sensation. I always ask the question, so what do you miss, if anything? And the answers are always different for each person. So I asked Luana, my friend, who's on the flip side. She said, Jennifer said she's showing me being in a car, a convertible, and the wind buffeting your face.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so those kind of, they never miss any of the nonsense that we think about. You know, they don't miss their clothing or something. And you get really unusual answers. So as I mentioned in Hacking the Afterlife, the singer Prince showed up. And I didn't know him. I met him once backstage doing a review. I have a close friend who went to his house quite a few times. So there's a frequency crossover there because I know my friend and he knows so whatever. But I'm there saying, you know, Prince, what can I do for you? And he's very passionate about helping people here, musicians in particular. But so I asked him.
He told me.
Okay, so you know.
I do.
And I asked him some of the tough questions, like, what's the matter with you? You know, why did you check out early? You had so much to give and offer and da-da-da. And he said, dancing killed me. And I said, what does that mean? And he said, actually, he was telling me that I needed to jump off cliffs without worrying about where I was going to land. And I said, thanks. But he said he loved jumping off pianos too much to stop. But in his case, he would jump off a piano in high heels. So the jumping eventually led to broken ankles, which led to broken hips, which led to pain pills, pain medication, which led to the elevator where, you know, they found him. But, you know, he has a sense of humor about that. You know, dancing killed me. I mean, it was a weird thing to say, and nothing that Jennifer or I could have conceived.
Yeah.
You know, but he had to describe it to us piece by piece.
That well, but
Kristen,
he just learned it really, really fast. That was what.
Well, you know, there's the thing of time is different for him. You know, so you might be able to learn something in a few minutes that would take us months to learn.
Right.
But there's also this other aspect, and it was my wife and I were in Chicago. We were taking a plane back, and my daughter got sick. And so my wife was saying prayers to, you know, the angels to come and make sure she was okay so we could get on the plane. And that night, she had a dream about my friend Luana, who had died 20 years ago. And her first reaction was to say, what are you doing here? And Luana said, you know, you asked for me. I'm here. And she said, well, how can you be here? You died 20 years ago. And she showed her a little model airplane that my wife had been looking at earlier in the day with my son. But she was like, I used this aircraft to get here. It's a joke. And then my wife said, I don't understand. How can you communicate with me, you know, 20 years later? And she said, think of 11:11. We meet at the decimals. So the next morning, my wife told me this dream. And she's like, I don't understand what that means. And I said, well, I think I do. My dad was an architect. So was my wife's. Most of the buildings in Salt Lake were built by her father. But in an architect's blueprint, when you want to put a hallway, you just put the number 11 on the blueprint. That's where the hallway goes. So if you think of 11:11 as two hallways, they're on one hallway, we're on the other hallway. They have to slow down their frequency, their vibration, which is exponentially at a different rate.
Yeah.
And we have to raise our vibration in order to meet at the decimals.
Yeah.
So it's also not only that it's not that he might have been learning. It's possible, that's accurate. But it's also that she wasn't quite in a state yet, or to be her frequency be raised and up enough to get to that communication point. You know, it's like when you have a TV channel and you get in between the channels and one's a little fuzzy and then or a stereo, and you know the signal's kind of off and you're hearing gibberish, and then eventually you get the signal on and then you can hear them. So it's that as well, that idea. And that also that first story of Andrew showing up, you know, right after he passed, you know, to your friend. So it's amazing because, of course, I've had this, you know, we've talked about this a lot with different people, but they first go like, well, why doesn't this person show up to me? Why did they show up to my friend? And partially it's that 1111 reason. It's like for whatever reason, their frequency, their stereo receiver is radiating at this level while they're sleeping. And they're able, and of course Andrew was able to run into the friend who was like, hey, come on, we can go and I got my pal. We can just sit down and we can jam and we can just be really connected. I mean, that story is so fantastic because not only do you have these unusual things of creating an amp. I mean, think of the math of that for you to make a CGI that would include a microphone and an amp. I mean, there's no reason he just play guitars, but he added that. I've heard that quite a bit from quite a few musicians who, once they get over there, they're learning an instrument. We were talking to Paul Allen, the Microsoft founder, and who was a huge fan of Jimi Hendrix. And I asked him, are you learning any instruments? And he said, I'm learning this, a ukulele. And the reason is the most simple of instruments is only like 3 or 4 chords. You see? So if you're going to create this as a CGI, it's much easier to do. But in order to get this, look at this, we're like show and tell here. In order to get that with an amp, much harder to do. The math is just more complicated. But finally, the Spirit in the Sky tune, the name of the song, aside from the fact that he said he was going to do that, right? He said, that's the song I'm going to bring to you. I was giving a talk in Tucson. Woman came up and said, I had this dream about my son who had passed away, and he was performing a song for me, and he was dancing around. And she was saying, you know, I think I made it up. I don't know if it was a dream. I said, well, what was the song? And she said, you know, I don't know. And I said, well, you do know. You just haven't opened yourself up to the possibility of answering the question. So what comes to mind when I say, what was the song? And she said, Stairway to Heaven. I said, well, I can't think of a more appropriate tune for your son to play for you. And then the odd thing is we were going to dinner, the whole group of us. When she got in the car, she turned on her car, and what song was coming on the radio? So there's something about that as well, which is, if you think about it, there's math involved, because if you know how radio programs are programmed, they're done like a day in advance, sometimes weeks in advance. So somebody on the flip side has to know the math to inject that song into the playlist so that it plays in your car the day that you turned it on.
I know, it's mind-bending.
And they focus your awareness on it.
It's mind-bending when trying to figure out how they do that, how they can orchestrate.
Well, it's math.
It's math, but it's also that they can, you know, it's time. Like they're living inside our future. Like they can see what's coming up, you know, like it's because time doesn't. Well, yeah. Like they're living,
you know, and I just want to say, because I talk about time a lot, and this idea that time is not set, it's that there are likely outcomes.
Yeah.
So if you're in a tower that's 60 stories high, you can tell people there's a storm coming up, but things happen. We have free will. People change their minds all the time. The storm suddenly could not come up. So even though you went around telling everybody there's a storm coming, and the storm didn't happen. So even in psychic medium, I try to have people at least say, look, I don't know if this is what's going to happen. However, I feel like this is a likely outcome. This is what I sense, that you should go to Tucson. You should take that job. You should marry that guy. That's what I'm getting. But it may not be accurate. You have to allow we have free will. Anyway, I just wanted to point that out, Kristen, that Spirit in the Sky. I cannot think of a better tune for him to tap you on the shoulder with.
Agreed.
It's so nice that he's so happy. Okay, so you said, let me teach you how to speak to Spirit. Like, give us, go for it, Rich. Teach us.
Give us a 1, 2, 3. All right, well, let me give you context for that. It came, this information came, it's in Backstage, Pass to the Flipside. It's in both books. There's like an introduction and the afterword, which are the same in both books, so that anybody picks up one of these books, they'll get the same information. But Michael Newton, if you've heard of him, he's the psychologist that I made the film Flipside about. He had 7,000 cases over 30 years, and he was a scientist in terms of finding out what the flip side's about. Okay, so one day I was doing a session with Jennifer about a month after he passed away, and she said, "Morton is here," and I said, "Morton? Who's Morton?" And she said, the guy that you made the film about." I said, "You mean Michael Newton?" She went, "Oh, yeah, sorry, I got his name wrong," which is funny because if she was trying to convince me of something, you'd think she'd get the name right. But anyway, now we always call him Morton when he shows up. So he's at our table. Now, I was not close friends with Michael. He's a character in his own right. I met him. I interviewed him. He gave me his last interview. It was like 3 hours long. And then over the years, I send him emails every now and then, happy birthday, Merry Christmas. But now he's sitting at our table. And I said, "Michael, what are you doing here?" And he said, "I'm helping people to communicate from both sides." And I said, "All right, let me clarify this because I don't want to misquote him." I said, "So you're helping people over here to speak with their loved ones over there?" He said, "No, the opposite. I'm helping people over here to communicate with their loved ones there." And I said, "Okay, how do you do that? Give me a 1, 2, 3. And he said, 1, say their name. And I said, "Do you say it aloud or do you say it in your head?" He said, "It doesn't matter, Richard." "Okay, what's 2? He said, "Ask your questions." And I said, "Well, how do people differentiate between their imagination having the answer they want to hear and actually making a connection?" He said, "Well, that's 3. When you hear the answer before you can form the question, then you'll know you have a connection." And I thought about the times in my life where I felt like or had the impression that a friend of mine was with me and I'd ask a question. And before I could get the, even in my mind. And so at first I thought, oh, it must be that, the speed of thought is faster or whatever. But what I like I say, so let me expand on what Michael said, if I may. People who have a hard time saying their loved one's name, some people do, because there's so much emotion involved. And so the frequency is all messed up. If you're emotional about the person you want to talk to, that's hard. So it can interfere. So if you want to keep it clear, I recommend take out a photograph of somebody. I'm looking around for a photograph. Take out a photograph of somebody and look at the picture and meditate on how it was taken. Where were you? Who was there? They're probably healthy and happy and laughing and as they are now. So you're really giving them a chance to appear to you as they are now. So you take out a photograph. Oh, hello. Oh, that's pretty funny. So you got the photograph, right? You're looking at that picture of your friend, somebody that you loved and took care of, and you took a picture of him. It's a friend of mine. He's a piano player for Joe Cocker. And I was over at his playing the piano the other day. But, he's still on the planet, but let's pretend he's not. So as I'm looking at the photograph, I listen and I can hear his voice because I know the timbre and tone and sound of my loved one's voice. And if I'm looking at the photograph, I know, no, he was laughing that time when I took that picture. Okay, you with me? So I'm also picturing where I was, or if I'm in the photograph, who took the picture, the time of day. So it's a sort of involved and deep meditation allows you to focus. I've also learned in my research that photographs are portals because every time you take a picture, you're capturing magnetic time. The photograph captures a piece of time. It's holographic in nature, so you're accessing the packet of time. You see? Photograph is just a representation, but because you're accessing that packet of time, it's a portal for them. Okay. So now you're into the photograph, you've walked into that picture, and now you start to ask them questions. I think the simplest ones, perhaps not for your group, but for people who find this a weird thing to do, I say ask simple yes or no questions. And you allow it. You say, look, I know the answers are yes, no, I don't know. And then you ask questions. You can ask simple questions, but I recommend don't ask them, where are you? Because they'll tell you, I'm right here. Don't ask them, how are you? Because they'll tell you, I'm fine. How are you? So okay. But if you ask them, were you killed? Were you murdered or whatever you want to ask, just allow the first answer to come to your mind. They can't lie over there. Apparently, from my research, they can not answer because you're not supposed to know the answer because that'll mess up your journey or their journey. All right? So you won't hear anything. But they can't tell you a falsehood because apparently the energy of telling a falsehood makes it impossible for them to speak. That's just what I've heard from them. They can't tell you something that's not accurate. They can tell you something that they remembered as accurate, and it could be wrong, but that's how they remembered it, you see? So you could ask somebody about an event that happened in 1620, and they go, yeah, I remembered it this way. And then when you research it, it's like, well, that's not the way other people remembered it. They told you what the way they remember. You know how memory is. Wacky. So in your questions, I say, ask questions you don't know the answer to. So you can ask, who was there to greet you when you crossed over? Very simple. An image. And the way that they communicate is they're using not your brain per se, even though it is your brain. Each experience becomes an electric signal that goes into an engram in your brain. So it's a referential point. But apparently, it's like a URL to the mind, to the memory that exists off like a hard drive, portable hard drive. Anyway, that's complicated. But still, they use that memory. So you ask, who was there to greet when you crossed over? And you see a picture of somebody. And then you think, oh, well, that's logical. That would be who I would think would greet them. But then you ask, was it her or him? Or it. A lot of times people are greeted by the animals. Okay? And this is key. Don't judge the answer. Because you hated your father. Why would you know what I'm saying? You just don't judge it. Go to the next question. Who are you hanging out with? Who are you over there with? They'll tell you. They're happy to. Sometimes you don't know them. You'll see a face or you hear a name and you're like, I don't know who that is. Write it down. What do you miss? What do you regret? What do you miss, if anything, about the planet? Just put it in my mind. What is the thing that you miss about being here? And they will. It could be something like a tactile sensation. Could be sex. I've heard that. Could be eating. Could be anything. I mean, I've heard some weird ones too. Then I ask, what do you want to tell your loved ones, if anything? By the time you get to that question, they've become adept at hearing your question, translating it into an electrical pattern that they can then answer. So by the time you get to that question, usually they're more complex. What do you want to tell people, if anything? It might be simple. I love you. Grow up. Snap out of it. Let go. You know, tell them to stop worrying. I'm okay. I'm fine. I've never heard anyone say, I'm not okay. I'm not fine. You know, tell them to worry about me. It's just not in the research. And, you know, by doing that, so it's 1, 2, 3. Say their name, ask your questions. When they answer a question before you can start the question, so who was, and they show you grandma, you have to say to yourself, well, how did you know what I was going to ask? You were obviously reading my mind.
Absolutely.
Okay, and if you can do that, then there's a lot of other things you can do. You see? And my last question I always ask, and what are the lottery numbers again? Recently, I've had animals show up.
Yeah.
People saying, I'm here with my dog. And then I decided, well, it's an etheric energy, so why don't I just ask the dog questions? That's born weird, totally bizarre fruit, where the animals tell me things that are only the owner could know, only I could have known, et cetera, et cetera. Anyway, Robert Towne is a friend of mine. He's the Oscar-winning screenwriter who wrote Chinatown. And he's alive. And we did a live session with him, and we were talking to a friend, me, Jennifer, Robert, Skype, talking to a friend who we both knew who passed away. And at some point I said, well, let's talk to Hira. Robert said, can we do that? I said, well, let's try. I knew Hira because I walked him every day for like 3 years. And this was his dog who treated me as if I was a vassal, as if I was a peasant allowed to walk with him. And Jennifer said, I'm seeing a white shag rug. I go, well, that's exactly what he looked like when he was laying down. And then Robert held up a picture of Hira, this white shag rug of a dog. And I asked him, I said, so Hira, can we talk to you? What do you want to tell us? He said, Robert treated me better than any human he knows.
Oh.
Robert did these things, A, B, C, D, all accurate, because I was there. Robert was like, how can I talk to I don't understand. How can I talk to my dog? And I'm like, try not to judge it. He's saying accurate things, Robert. Anyway, my point is we're at the we're at the side of an iceberg of this information, that the idea that your relatives could come and speak to you, you start there. Then you branch out. Is there anybody that you've ever met? Anybody, if you're a fan of somebody, you're already familiar with their frequency. So if you're a huge fan of some musician who died, you're going to get an answer. Now, you have to remember, they may tailor their answers based on knowing from their perspective who you are. They may tailor their answers so that it doesn't disrupt who you are. Mm-hmm. They're not allowed to interfere and say, hey, you got to quit your job. You know, your job is ridiculous. They're not allowed to do that.
Yeah.
But they can answer questions about themselves. Mm-hmm. You can ask them questions about you, and they may answer. I'm just saying you have to sort of take that with a grain of salt, write it down, maybe ask again in a week, maybe ask through somebody else the same question. Mm-hmm. You told me last week that I needed a new boyfriend. Before I dump him and kick him to the curb, let me see if somebody else has that same opinion. You see?
Yeah. Yeah. Oh no, spirit never tells you what to do because they're under the covenant of free will. Like you have to make those choices for yourself. But they can guide you. They can guide you. They can guide you. They can guide you. But they're never going to tell you to boot him out or get a new job or whatever. But you know what they're saying is that how it works over there is vibrational resonance. Actually, they're saying it works in all areas of everywhere. It's just, you know, over there, here, it's just different frequencies. But it's all about vibrational resonance. And so when you have an intention, somebody on the afterlife who has that same intention, you can attract very easily. You can speak to very easily. So let's look at you, Rich. Your intention is to teach humanity about connecting to the other side, you know, like you have this huge intention. And so you have access all areas because those people that are over there have a similar intention that you're talking to. Like I've always wondered, like, why was Prince talking to me? I didn't like him as a musician, you know, like, but his intention is a teacher of consciousness. That's his intention. That's my intention in this life. So he very easily came through based on this law of...
He's interrupting your signal right now, by the way.
Is he? Yeah, I know, I signal. But yeah, so based on...
We can ask him, pull you back a little bit, Prince. She likes you now. She doesn't not like you now. She likes you now. Now she hears you from a different perspective.
Oh, he and I have had some great chats. I chat to him all the time because I ask him about being a teacher, you know, like a teacher on earth, like a master, and then, you know, that's the stuff that I've talked about. But Robin Williams, had a chat with him after he died. Like I've had a chat with lots of people after they died, only because their intention has been to help humanity, to uplift humanity. Wayne Dyer was the same. So our intentions align. And that's the same with life. When you have an intention, you attract people into your life that align with the similar intention. So it works here and there.
Yeah, I agree with you. I agree with you, except for... I must tell you, though, but I keep getting around this point, but since I've seen you last, I've probably had, I don't know, maybe 12, a dozen, maybe 20 conversations with people who are fully conscious, and I walk them in to visit with their counsel. And I get their counselors to talk to us,
you know,
give us answers. And
I've seen you do that, and I loved that. I saw you do it on some show. I saw you
Dr.
do it.
Drew, right?
I did it with Dr. Drew.
Dr.
Drew. Yeah, you did that. But you did that before I interviewed you last because we talked about that. But
okay.
Somebody like Rich to do that with you, would somebody like that? Could you do that with somebody here today?
Sure.
Is anyone going to put their hands up to talk to your counsel?
Sure.
Rosie's game for it.
Very good. All right. See, how long did that take?
Well, that was a little longer than probably about half an hour. But you're good at this, Rich. You're really good at this. Are you doing these as sessions?
I'm really good at it.
Are you doing these as sessions? Like, are you putting yourself out there? Like,
well, I'll tell you, some people have hired me.
Laura wants to come. You know, like, we're going to start a new business for you doing these as sessions.
Well, no, I have. Look, here's what I did. Jennifer, you know, she's always saying to me, you need to charge people to do this. Okay. And she's like, you need to charge them for your time. And it's true. Because I will, you know, spend 4 hours traipsing around people's subconscious. So I started doing that. And so I tell people it's $100 an hour. And if we don't go anywhere, it's zero. But there's a little problem with that because, you know, I tell them it's $100 minimum, right, whatever. But the problem is you get an hour into it and you start going, do we really want to stop? I mean, come on. We're like... You know, through your previous lifetime and da-da-da-da.
Well, that's when you've got to have your guides on hand to guide you as to how far. Because, you know, when I'm tuning into you.
Yeah, but I know what you're saying. I'm just saying I can't stop asking questions.
I know. Well, this is what I'm saying to you. I see you as this curious person, this curious mind that'll just go and go and go. But you have to say to your guides, like, tell me when to stop. Because the thing is that your curious mind overrides what they want, the amount of information that people want to be released at the time. Our linear mind can. But Rich, it's been such a blast. Thank you so much.
Oh, thank you. It's always a treat to talk to you. And, you know.
This has been such a blast. Now, listen, if you do these sessions, I'll spruik the word for you and let people know that you're doing them.
Well, just tell them to reach out to me if they want to schedule a session. I just tell them, ABC. I've done it a few times.
Basically, you charge a minimum of $100 and then take it from there. Whatever.
It's for the time. If you don't go anywhere, you don't have to pay anything.
Yeah.
Then it's like an hour out of your. I'll tell you, a friend of mine called me up. He's like, "Oh, my sister, I really wanted to do one of these sessions." I'm like, "Okay," and I said, "Why don't we just meet at this local hotel?" But he brings his whole family in. So there's his wife, there's his mother-in-law, his brother,
but as
all these people.
You can do it online. You don't have to actually do it in person. You can do it sitting on your computer. Yeah.
You can do it over the phone. You can do it online.
Yeah.
It helps, just like you said, if somebody like Rosie, who's meditated, who's had experiences and allowed herself to just express herself. But, like the Dr. Drew one, at the end of it, he said, I feel like you hypnotized me. And I said, how did that happen? We're drinking coffee.
Sitting at a radio station.
My finger? I don't know. But whatever.
Yeah.
Anyway.
No, it was good. It was great to see you do it to like a more skeptical mind. But thank you so much. Thanks, guys. For
very good.
Kristen says her apologies. She had to run off. She's got the kids.
Oh, that's okay. Thank you, Laura.
And
thank you, Darcy. Thanks for talking to John Lennon for us, Rosie. Very cool, Darcy. Thank you.
Thank you. That was fascinating.
That was
all right.
Beautiful.
See you guys later.
Love you.
Bye.
Bye.
Love you.
Bye.
Be good.